everybody, welcome to another episode of Shooting the Shift. This week we are joined by photographer and videographer Mark Rae.
Hey!
He's going to be hanging out and chatting with us about our topic for the week. We have got Bryn. We've got Milton.
Oh.
Wrong way. We've got Grandad. So my camera's mirrored, which is why I get that confused every week. You'd have thought I'd have learnt by episode 22 which direction to point, but apparently not. So we're going to chat about photography and videography at events. It's something you can see on the channel and on the Facebook page quite regularly. And then we brought an actual responsible adult called Mark on to talk about things beyond our comprehension.
None of us are responsible adults, are we?
No one's a responsible adult in this, but apparently, according to one of our viewers last week, Milton, I was wrong for calling a panellist an arsehole about 2 seconds into the episode. So I'd just like to repeat, for future reference, Milton is an arsehole.
Hey! You give me free
I do give you free That's why I get to call you an arsehole whenever I want.
Damn it.
You can receive free and still be an arsehole.
Yeah.
I was the first one to swear as well. I lose.
Ooh.
You do lose. But luckily for you, Milton, I've cleaned up the dog poo this week, so there's none to actually clean up.
Yay.
So anyway, onto the topic at hand. Photography and videography, right? So we've got this. We live in a magical modern age where if someone said to me, I want to film some stuff at a car show, what should I start with? I'd just go get this thing out your pocket, right? And start playing about with it. And then when you've got that, steady your footage up a little bit. So go out and get, this one's actually for a GoPro, but go out and get yourself a nice 3-axis gimbal that will work on your phone. And then figure out your audio quality a little bit and improve that, and just start steadily going through. I mean, you can get a GoPro adapter for those things that just mounts the GoPro on a phone plate, essentially. So once you've got that, it's a bit of kit you're going to use for a while.
You don't also need it. I know someone that did vlogging every day of his life for 3 years on an iPhone.
Yeah.
And he did everything on it.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a point now where phone cameras are so good that they're almost comparable with a DSLR. I mean,
within reason,
considering I'm an amateur, I could probably take a better photo on my phone than my DSLR. However, if you get somebody who knows what they're doing with a DSLR, they'll beat you all day long.
Yeah.
That's the big difference. And
yeah.
I'm guessing Mark's going to say the same. Is like photo quality from phones and things is incredible now.
It's impressive. The lenses are the thing.
Yeah.
You want, I've used cameras with like really low megapixels, but the lens has been great, and it really does. It is really down to lens quality. And yeah, okay, my camera's big and huge and does all the 4K video and everything like that, but your iPhone can do 4K, and there's an amazing amount of stuff that is shot with a mobile phone.
Yeah.
It's just, you go back 5-10 years and the phone quality was rubbish for videos, but they were still getting put out everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can start with your phone. The phone's got great options for being able to sort of lay out the screen. You can get the cross hatches, so you can sort of use the rule of thirds and everything on it. So it's a really good starting point, learning point on how to actually line something up and get it looking good. And then you can move on to your DSLR, your mirrorless, even just a bridge camera or a point and shoot.
See,
just on the back of that before we move on, we're at a point now where you can shoot and edit and upload all on your phone.
Yep.
So you can shoot something at a car show, edit it down into clips, and have it uploaded before you even touch a PC.
Yeah, I've got Premiere
for the
Rush
rookie,
on my phone.
What is the rule of 3? I think I know what it is, but just for people who don't.
The rule of thirds. So you kind of split your, I don't know if I can get it in my hands, you sort of split your screen into 3. sort of center and then across. And then you kind of want to look at sort of the main areas you want, and sort of the top. I'm trying to point into the right place. If you see sort of that sort of area you want something, or that sort of area you want something, and you kind of line it up on the rule of thirds.
You want about that grid?
Yeah, that grid. Yeah. So if you're doing an interview, you want to have someone sitting on one side looking into the space, rather than having, sometimes if they're sitting dead center, it's a bit boring when it comes on screen. But if you've got them to one side looking into the space, it looks like they're talking to someone. A bit like what Bryn's doing.
Yeah. Bryn, you actually need to go the other way, and then it'll look like you're talking to Milton.
Oh, well, I was thinking like Mark says, you want like a subject on this third.
Yeah.
We've got another piece of subject on this third.
Yeah.
That's the kind of rule of thirds.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah. And then if you're doing an interview, Bryn would be talking into that space.
Yeah.
Although sometimes breaking the rule can be quite good. So having saying that how Bryn had it before, but then looking off to his left rather than to his right, it can get people thinking because it's not quite right. So breaking the rules sometimes works, but yeah, generally you want that space to look into, which is what I was trying to do when I was doing camera operating at a festival and stuff. When those talks, you have to get people walking into that space. So it's but phone's a good place to start with learning that. Then you can start moving up in the technology, better lenses, better sensors. The phone's got a tiny little sensor, so you need more light. But obviously, the bigger the sensor, the less light you technically need.
Yeah. So I from phones, I went originally to GoPros, and then GoPro have kind of been left behind because they're still just a little box that you can mount to something. That is the DJI equivalent in a small rig with a power adapter and a mic adapter in the side of it. And that's a good place to start, because then you can bolt on a bit of lighting, if I've not messed my stuff up like I had. Bolt on a bit of lighting, jam a Rode shotgun mic in the side, plug that in, and that is a perfectly capable little bit of vlogging kit.
It's a great place. Yeah, great for vlogging.
I think the other thing is GoPro is quite a high price point for if you get the top spec one, whatever that is, black, I think it is.
8 or something, isn't it now?
We're on
9,
now, I think.
9.
I haven't kept up with GoPro because there's so many other options now.
Yeah, but comparing the price points of the DJI to the GoPro is massively different.
The DJI Action Cam is like 329 quid, whereas this is the old premium bit of kit from DJI, which is essentially the gimbal off one of their drones on just a little tiny thing that I can flip an adapter out, plug my phone into, and my phone's my monitor. It's got the grid for your rule of thirds on it. You can get a microphone adapter for it, and again, you can build out a rig just like all the parts I use on that DJI Action. Again, I use with this setup. I've got screen mounts, everything like that. And like Milton's driver video that we've got on our channel, the thing that's swinging about inside Milton's car when we're driving inside the arena is that little DJI literally just being flicked between selfie mode and normal vision, which is how we got shots of him doing press ups from inside the car, because it's not, you don't have to have that big camera that you'd have with you. You've not got your DSLR. You've got these tiny little point and shoot things
that fits in your pocket.
That fit in your pocket. And as you start graduating onto bigger and better kit, that stuff's still got its place in your setup.
Yeah, I've got Polaroid Cube Pluses, little Polaroid like equivalent of the I guess it's the GoPro. Was it the GoPro Cube or whatever it is? The little square.
The Session,
the Session. It's got built-in magnets, so I can literally just lob it anywhere that's metal, set it up, press record, and it's going. And
That's clever.
It's built in stabilization, everything. So when I ran my car up Chelsea Welsh Hill Climb, literally just put a little piece of metal in my sort of in the roof, stuck it to that, have it sitting out. I didn't even have to worry about changing which way it was focused. As soon as you turn it on, whichever way up it is, it flicks the video around.
That's one of the reasons. As I say, that's one of the reasons I like the Session, because I got a Session back way when they came out. So they were 160 quid, which is cheap for a GoPro. I also like how light they are to put them on the side of my helmet. And it's easy to, because they're square, they can go in the mount any way round. So the problem putting it on your the normal GoPro on your helmet is you stick the sticker on the side of your helmet, and you have to do a 90-degree mount, and then you've got a big chunky camera out here, and it takes up quite a lot of room. When you put the Session on, you don't have to have the adapter. You put the case straight on, just rotate the camera 90 degrees, and it goes straight in. It's nice and light as well.
The only problem I've always found with the Session is when I do that on the side of my helmet, I will always manage to put the record button facing into the helmet where I can't get to it.
The good thing about them as well is you can put them really good for dashpan. Dashpan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like mounts so you can pedal cam. That's what I was trying to say. Mount it on the dash to view the pedals.
Yeah, because it's a small camera. It's real easy to mount in really tight spaces. But then there's all sorts of other cameras out there that will do the same job.
Yeah,
GoPro is basically the Apple of action cameras, I'd say.
Yeah, I would love to jam an Insta360 down near someone's pedals because you'll just get the right angle. You don't have to think about
I've got a 360 camera. Which I can use on my wire run, so that I don't have to worry. And set it up recording. I don't have to worry about changing the angle. I can go back in edit and set the angle I want, where I want it, how I want it.
Bryn doesn't like that.
I don't think this is a good idea because, like, have you seen Milton? Like, his fans will just be watching his crotch the whole time. If you've got a 360 camera down the pedal.
I do want to go with a 360 camera at some point because a few years ago when Mad Mike built his Mark Rae MX5, there was a shot of him doing one of like the promo shoots just after he built it. Obviously, MX5, no roof, convertible, puts the 360 camera on top of the roll bar as he's drifting, so you can either see what he's doing behind the car and everything. But because there's no roof, you can see literally everything. Yeah,
that's a good thing. You can just chuck it right in the middle.
I think the great thing about the weird thing about the 360 camera is if you've got it on a pole, like there's always that one bit of the shot that's just this.
It can be a bit weird.
You see that quite often because Google lets users upload videos now, and you get quite a lot of people doing 360 photos, and you'll see that every now and then, and you'll look down on the photo, and it's just a guy with his phone.
Yeah, mine connects to my phone, and I sort of hold it up, and I'm looking, and I realise that I'm maybe looking out over that way. But if I twist it, if I spin it round, I'm looking at myself at a really weird angle, and no one needs to see that.
I think. Like 360 videos are amazing, but like I don't know, I don't like them sometimes because I almost feel like it's harder to know what you should be looking at in some things. Like the MX5 video is amazing because you can look wherever you want, but at the same time, when people take a 360 video and use the gimbal and go everywhere, but still focus on where you want to go, or there's ones you're seeing quite a lot of drifting where it just pans automatically. It's also nice because you don't like I've had it where you get lost and you're like looking at something over here and something cool happens the other side.
But one of the things you should be doing as a videographer, Brent, is when you get your 360 footage, is not necessarily using it as a 360 bit of footage. You should be selecting your frame out of that and telling the story that you want to tell. But
it's all.
But as Mark says, when he's using his wireline, you can't guarantee that a gust of wind's not going to blow the camera about. So as the camera goes down the wireline, it's capturing absolutely everything around it. And then you just go, well, now we can do a barrel roll in that shot without neading to actually set the camera up spinning as it goes down the wireline.
That's a good point, though, because something I was told quite a long time ago by a videographer when I was working for when I was working for the drifting company, and we were filming an advert, and he basically said, just film everything. You are better to film everything now and not use the footage later on, then you get to the editing stage and you don't have the footage. So film everything. Doesn't matter what it is, just film it. And then if you use it, you use it. If you don't use it, you don't use it.
It's all about B-roll.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You get as much B-roll as you can get.
Especially at this point when we're not using film anymore. It costs you nothing.
Yeah.
You might need another memory card at some point, but it doesn't cost you anything to delete it at a later date.
No, and like when I've gone and shot, like when we shot Yakushi, right, during lockdown, and we went to, not during lockdown, when it was that brief bit when we could have a show.
Between lockdowns.
Yeah. The in-between
that odd period that set everything else off.
Yeah, that one. The uninformed decision, we'll refer to it as. When we shot that, we went to a show. We were there for what, 8 hours, Matt?
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah. We filmed for 4 hours, right? So I've got 4 hours of footage. The video that came out is 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
Like,
I was a runner on a documentary for the BBC. Spent 2 nights filming this whole load of reconstruction of a murders that happened. And then I watched the actual show, 2 episodes, half an hour each. 20 seconds was used of what we filmed.
Yeah.
And I was literally working from 8 o'clock. I think it was one night I worked from 8 o'clock till 7 in the morning, overnight, driving a car around with cameras and everything all built onto it, all strapped onto it and everything, and then doing other bits somewhere else, doing the reconstruction. And yeah, literally none of what we shot, apart from like 2 seconds in like one bit, was used. That was it.
It's pretty similar to when we come home from a drift day. Like, you'll come home with 60 to 100 gigabytes of film, and you'll edit that down into a 3.5-4 minute video that's like 3 gigabytes. Like, you throw the majority of the footage away, but you have to be filming everything to capture the bits that you need. If you're not filming, you're going to miss it.
The easiest thing to film is a podcast, because I'll record this, right? I put in the bleeps because Milton's sworn, or Bryn's sworn if he's on a rant, or I've sworn because it's just how I use language.
BMW straight pipe, Bryn. Stop it, Patrick, you're scaring him.
And there's the rubber duck appearing again. But
speaking of explosion.
See, even Bryn's fed up of that now, Milton. And Mark can probably sympathise with me on this. When he says explosion, and I want an explosion to appear here, Mark, how much fun is that not in Premiere and After Effects?
It's easy, Mark. Please tell me. Fun. Oh, it's really hoping, Marco. It's really easy.
Some things can be, but no.
Just a clip art explosion.
I mean, even that's not easy, because you've got to perfectly position it. You've got to track the pixel of you doing this with your hand, because you never keep your hand still.
Okay.
Still not still. You're moving your hand.
Still not still.
Yeah.
Still got to track it.
Yep. Still got to track it, because you're now going to move. Unless you're going to sit like that the rest of this episode, you're going to move your hand at some point.
Okay.
So that's right. So when you're doing videography, don't let Milton anywhere near it, because he'll shout explosion, and then you've either got to do something or make him look like a muppet.
But it's a good time to bring up editing though, because I think probably 75% of the resulting video is the edit. Because if you don't edit it properly and you don't put actual thought into it, telling the story like you said at the start that you want to tell, it's going to look amateurish. But equally, you can take rubbish video and edit it well, and it looks way better than it is. That's the flip side of filming with your phone. Like, the quality's not as great as it could be, but you put all the time and effort into the editing, it comes out way better.
If you tell a story and you get that the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story, doesn't really matter about what the quality is. If someone actually understands what you're trying to say, then you've won. Yeah, basically.
I've been told time and time again by people that audio quality is actually far more important than film quality on a video.
I was about to say that, because you see videos of people at tracks and it's windy and you see them talking, but all you hear is.
That's why you have a dead cat for all of your microphones, Milton.
I get this watching drift games sometimes. Their audio quality is awful because they don't they have a DS. I think they film with a DSLR with a microphone strapped to the top, and
Yeah.
that's great when it's not windy and they're facing the camera.
Hmm.
The second they turn away, you can't hear a thing they're saying, and you can't lip read because they're not facing the camera. And you go outside, it's just all wind noise, and you can't hear what they're saying.
I
You just
really-
need
I
lapel
really wanna-
microphones.
I really want to test my little Rode shotgun with its dead cat on Bryn's spinny whoosh thing, just facing into the wind and see what happens. Have you seen Bryn's creation before, Mark?
You must have seen it. You've been at Rock.
Yeah, I think you must have seen it when we were out drifting.
Is this the thing that keeps it straight?
Yeah.
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 It was supposed to. It wasn't
Supposed to.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It was
Supposed to keep it
DIY.
straight.
It worked as well as it was expected to.
What annoys me as well is when people
You see,
have videos.
that's where you use the 360 camera, because then you can just bump the camera on top, and then you can edit it later, and it'll stay straight.
But it
Well,
just,
at the time, it wasn't a thing. Like, they were about, and when you saw a
They were
360
new.
camera in a video, you were like,
Oh, yeah,
"This
they
guy's
were.
got money. Look at this." Dude." But now it's like,
Yeah,
they're everywhere.
I got my
I mean,
I got mine off
you,
Facebook for 20 quid.
I can say I think I saw for a while you could do 360 cameras with like 4 GoPros strapped together in a weird
that was
configuration.
good.
Yeah.
That was the early days when you just had
Yeah.
the GoPro balls.
Yeah, with and you knew they had money because they had 20 GoPros in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 360 camera does enable you to get essentially what you were trying to achieve with your spinny camera, because that's my favorite kind of onboard drifting videos where the camera is basically following the track and the car just rotates underneath the camera.
Yeah.
You can also do clever things. You can record the same run and have the main screen as like the point of view of the driver, but then you can also put in clips of this is where you hit the clipping point and run the wall in a sort of superimposed bit, and it's from the same run. So you're playing the video twice, but in one.
From one take.
Yeah.
And that's
Front and
also
back
down
and
to having as many cameras filming. Like you say, you've got to have as much filming as possible. So if you've got a camera on the inside, just the car, just set up facing forward, you've got the 360 degree one. You can play around with different options then in edit.
Well,
What
that's the
does
thing,
annoy me is when
that-
you've got GoPros. Sorry, Matt, go on.
No, carry on.
They don't change the focus, so it's inside the car, and you can see everything inside the car, and all you see is the windscreen just bright white because they haven't changed it to.
That's
Pinpoint
not
focus.
focus. That's exposure, and that is
That's the
actually
limit of them.
that's where we're going to get into. This really good segue there, Milton. The next thing you get is
One
not
moment.
new
Matt
camera
had a
equipment.
Hang on, Bam. He had a point.
Okay,
Speak.
all right,
No,
go
No.
ahead.
I'll go. I don't know which way I've got a point. Go with that point.
All I was going to say is there was at one point I was running 3 GoPros on my car while drifting. So front-facing helmet camera and then 2 cameras on the sides facing backwards. So I could get both clipping points on either side, anybody chasing me, then the forward view for if I was chasing anybody else.
Yeah.
You just got to get all the angles, whereas you got a 360 camera, especially on an MX-5 with no roof, you just plant one camera on there and you film everything.
Yeah, so returning to the point that I think Mark was getting quite excited that I'd pulled these out of a box, actually. So the next thing you do is Mark's right, you start looking at lenses. You don't necessarily upgrade your kit. And I'm going to make Mark very happy now, because that is clearly an ND filter for the action. And that
Very nice.
is an ND filter for the pocket.
Oh, that is cute.
What's
So your
what's
ND
that for the?
that is a polarizing filter. So what you're talking about, Milton, is actually overexposure of the camera lens. That's why the windscreen looks white. So there's just too much light coming into the filter. So the ND filters allow you to polarize that light, bring it down a bit so it's not overexposed, and just have a better quality image. Now, you can see the difference. There's a point in our show videos where I go from not using ND filters to using ND filters. It's the only change that's made, and the video quality is about 100 times better.
I think on a GoPro it's not actually called that in the settings, but it's essentially the same thing. It's just
You know what I mean, don't you, Matt? There's a button you
know
can
what you
press, and it basically chooses whether you want the focus to be out or if you want it to be central. And as soon as you change central, it stops you getting it overexposed. It's an actual setting.
It's called
Yeah.
spot metering.
That's the one.
It's the same on a lot of cameras.
Yeah.
It depends on where you want a meter to be able to to take the details of where the light is. Like on my photography for like static cars and things like that, I'll use a circular polarizer, which will get rid of a lot of the reflection in glass, so you can sort of get a shot through it. And it's
that's I've done sort of action photography at Supercar Experience Days before, and they use that UV filter. I think it's it's
a polarizing filter.
It's polarizing.
You can get a polarizing filter. Yeah. That would be so you can see people inside the car.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, if you don't have that on, it's just all reflections. And I've used one of their spare cameras before, and it's just all reflections in it. It's incredibly difficult because at that point, it's your job to take the photo of the person driving the car. But if that's not on there, then nobody's going to buy your photos because you can't see themselves driving. Bryn's got a very good point.
Bryn has got a point.
Sorry, I was just going to
Bryn's getting excited.
I was just going to go science real quick because I love polarizing filters and how they work, because I did the same thing as Matt. And you have this filter on the end of the lens, and you would just turn it until the windscreen reflections went away, because when light hits a surface, it bounces back, it gets aligned. So all the little light waves are all going the same way. So a polarizing filter is just that same thing. It only lets light through if it's aligned with the filter. So you turn it to the point at which all of those reflection lines are no longer the same plane, and they go away. And that is exactly how modern 3D glasses work. Your right eye has lines in this direction, your left eye has lines in this direction, and then you can project two images that are aligned, and only one eye sees one and the other sees one.
To clarify the difference that Bryn's talking about here, that is a normal ND filter. Now, I know it's quite small, but that's a normal ND filter for the...
She said.
And then that is a polarizing ND filter with its tiny little wheel around the edge.
Or you can go with...
Mark's now going to show some expensive
Let's get a real size one in here,
I was going to say...
So that's just a 52mm... What's that? Circular polarizer. So that will twist and change.
So if you put that up, Mark, above so you got the light behind you, would that filter it then?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, even if I put it over there, you can... I don't know if it will change much in here because of where I am. That's the polarizer.
Essentially, what a polarizing filter is the opposite of a retroreflector. So you look at reflectors on bikes or cars or what they left on the moon, and no matter what angle you shoot a light at it, it comes back at exactly the same angle.
What, the little orange triangles you have on your bike?
Yeah. So that you shoot a light at that from any angle at all, it will come back exactly the same, whereas a polarizing filter does the opposite. And shoots up in a different direction, so it doesn't come back into the lens.
Oh, is that
and then
you've
got the ND filters, which are just literally, this is an ND8. It's basically just basically a darker lens. The polarizer is slightly different to an ND, but you use a lot of the neutral density ones for like long exposure shots. You know, where you get all the ones where the water's all smooth, and you generally have to use a sort of ND filter for that. And the darker that is, the longer you have to have your exposure.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So is that how you can get? You said about the reflectors. Is that how they make like signs that are when you put headlights on them, they're always bright and stuff?
Yeah.
Can you get paint like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had an idea.
That's a bad idea, Milton.
It's a really good
Whatever it
idea.
is, it's bad.
I know what his brain's just done. His brain has just gone, I could reflect all the light of the speed camera flashback at the speed camera. It's a bad idea, Milton. That gets you arrested.
I'm thinking you do your livery, and then you could do a sub livery in that paint, so you can only see it at certain lights.
That'd be cool.
Same thing.
And actually, while we're on the subject of
well,
light,
screw you, Matt.
While we're on the
It's
subject
my
of light,
idea.
it's probably a good idea to just talk about like standard lighting setups, right? So, in my home studio, and as much as possible, I will try and use 3 points of light. So
you've got your OnlyFans light behind you, in front of you, yeah?
I've got my key light up in this corner, which is just and then a fill light up here, which is slightly further away, slightly lower brightness, but it just takes away some of the harsher shadows on my face. And then I have a hair light behind me, which is why this shoulder appears far crisper than this other side where there's not light coming from. And then I use these other two lights in the background just to make the light that is just a light behind me not seem as completely alien as it would do.
I've done the same thing. I've got like a multi-light up there, and then I've got a light that keeps changing to mix up the mood.
Meanwhile, I've got two computer screens here with just white on them.
So when you see those...
But Matt's basically done the basic thing of having a light and a key light, just
with computer monitors.
He's got porn up on one side. That's why it's dark. He's got dark mode on.
Well, you see, Bam's got one of the most famous kind of lights. He's got a ring light in front of him, and that's actually called that because of OnlyFans, and it exists to light up your ring.
In fact, being honest with you, Brent, there is a ring light in this setup, and it's because
that's what made me honest.
and it's because I didn't want to spend another £120 on the Elgato Keylight Air, so I spent 20 quid on a little cheap ring light on Amazon that's just set up in this corner because it doesn't need to do
You'll
the same
make the money
brightness.
back because you're going to have the most well-lit arsehole on the internet. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I thought occurred.
If we lost Bryn for the night.
A few moments later.
Right, so we've got Bryn back in the room after his comments about my butthole, which, Bryn, does genuinely lend further credence to the rumours about you and Chris.
You've broken him again.
Right, Bryn's back in the room.
Again. He's back.
So, and we're now at the stage where you've got your rig for everything. This is the holder I use for the DJI Pocket, so that I can set up the same thing I've got on the Action. And then you get to the point where you start making some quite grown up and expensive decisions, right? So my expensive decision is I've decided the next thing that takes my videography to the next level is I really need a drone.
I think as well that everything that we've talked to up to this point is essentially amateur still. I think you're at that point where you've probably got the equipment to do a professional level video.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's all in the editing. But this is the point where if you want to go further, you've got to start spending some real money.
This is the point where you can turn around and charge someone to shoot a video for them, and them not go, is that really just being held in his hand? Because if you put me and Mark in the same room, and I've got my little Pocket plugged into my phone, and I'm like, this is my setup, I'm good to go. And Mark turns up with his big camera. You know who the professional is in that setup, right?
Yeah, I can go with a similar thing. I was in Brighton just before Christmas. I was using a little point and shoot camera. I've got a Sony WX500 that I use for like close-up videos and other bits. And it's in my bag 90% of the time. It's so easy just to carry around, get some nice shots with it. I was using that for just sort of a little bit of street photography. My friend had a mirrorless camera, another Sony one, and someone came up to him and went, "Can you take some photos for me on this?" And sort of handed him a DSLR. And my friend's like, "I haven't got a clue. I'll pass it to my friend that does photography." But because they saw I was using a point and shoot thing, they didn't think that I was the photographer. They thought he was because he had what was deemed the better equipment.
Yeah, and I love a good point and shoot, right? It's easy. And for what we do, I can turn around to, if we're at a drift day and I'm with these guys, I can go, right, guys, press that button, it's recording, we'll just set up the angle right, and this is what you need to do, and you set away.
Yeah.
And you don't need to adjust anything throughout the day, or we'll turn up to a show and I'll give 4 or 5 of my mates cameras and go, right, go forth and shoot B-roll for me. I'll get all the A clips, and we're good to go.
That's the good thing with the action cameras. You can just hand an action camera out to someone, and they literally, that's where the lens is. I've got to point it at that.
What
Yeah,
is
I think
B-roll
that's-
for people that don't understand?
So you've got your A roll is all your what's telling the story, and then you've got your B roll, which is the filler. So you've got like a lot of stuff that will be set to showing to here, and then it will be like I'll have mentioned something, and in edit you'll go to a shot of something else just to show it, and that will be your B roll.
So for example, on our drifting videos, your A roll is the videos of you drifting, and the B roll is like panning shots of you working on the car or changing your tires in the pits.
Yeah, unless the whole story is the whole day of you getting your car going to be able to then drift it. You almost sometimes the drifting part is your B roll.
The other side of that
sounds strange. It depends on how you're telling your story.
The other way to think about that, guys, is because we film a podcast and we want to upload it to Spotify, and I keep saying to you guys, stop saying we'll put this video in here. The stuff that I'm saying, stop saying we'll put this video in. That's the B-roll. The A-roll for this is us talking to camera and having the conversation. The B-roll is the bits that we use to reinforce that. So saying, here's a video of Milton drifting, or here's Bryn working on his engine, or here's Matt getting annoyed at his 3D printer not printing right.
He doesn't work on it
fairly often.
He knows I've picked on him for that.
Yeah.
But then you move on. So then you do get to this point where you start making expensive decisions, and the rules around drones are the rules around drones. And the only reason I'm thinking about it is DJI just released the Mini 2, which is 249 grams, which puts it just under the legal limits for being able to fly over a group of people, which means I can film at a car show with the drone legally.
Is that the rules then? Is it to do with weight?
It's to do with weight,
it's to do with weight. And
so you can come to a car show or to an event. You don't have to have permission then.
You've got you can't fly over a crowd of people, so you've got to be really careful about what you're doing at a car show. But if you're at a smaller event, so if you're at a drift day or something like that, it then becomes a group of people, and as long as you're not within X distance of an airport, you're good to go.
It's one of those
without
things,
going into too much depth of the law.
Essentially, the weight thing is you crash a 2 kilogram drone into a person, it's gonna hurt because you've got to have stronger blades, and the thing weighs a lot more.
If you crash a 2 kilogram drone into anybody, you're probably severely maiming them.
Yeah, but you crash a drone that weighs 249 grams into somebody, you'll probably never notice it.
And there was a musician at a gig, and he had a drone fly up to him on stage, and he went to hold it so he could sort of put his face to the camera, and literally just cut his hand up on the blades. He completely misjudged what he was doing. Obviously, someone else piloting it doesn't know exactly what they're doing with it.
Some of the proper grade like drones, I think one of the ones at Top Gear, I'd seen one of theirs. It's got like 6 rotors on it, and each one has two carbon fiber blades on it.
Oh yeah,
you know what carbon fiber's like when it's stiff. It's like razor blades.
Yeah. And
there's different types of drones, isn't there? There's more mobile ones, and there's one for more static and sort of panning shots that are really big, and they've got wide wingspans, so they can just float. And
that's not necessarily a thing. That it's more about the older drones tend to be quite a lot larger. If you look at the early DJI drones, they were effectively designed to jam an SLR, a DSLR on, or a mirrorless camera on, and the gimbal's there to hold that steady. And because you're lifting that camera, you need quite a large platform to hold that steady. When you get down to the drones that have got a little tiny gimbal like that on, then it's not necessarily that they're any worse, because they'll all film in 4K, at least.
Yeah.
Like they're not poor quality cameras on these things. If you get into low light situations, you might start struggling to see the subject, but actually, they're not. It's not about the size anymore.
Right.
So,
what you'll probably find though with the BBC like filming Top Gear is they'll have DSLR or a good quality mirrorless
I think
full
the
frame.
difference there is you look at, for example, the one where they were in Africa. and they're probably filming a quarter of a mile up off the ground. And if you've got a 200-gram drone and there's a gust of wind, you're just going to get blown off. You've got to have a beefy, weighty rig to get that steady shot. Otherwise, you're just going to get blown away. That's why a lot of people, you can't use them in high winds.
You'd be amazed at what they can do. I've seen a picture of the new Mini 2 flying through a snowstorm, and it's stable.
They're getting a lot better, but you'll find for proper TV production, they are the larger kit. Like Matt was saying, they will be the bigger, beefier ones, purely because they're carrying the weight. They've got to carry the transmitter and the larger camera, because they'll be
batteries as well, I guess.
They'll be using full frame and using it for longer. Because you look at what they put in the cars, on their tripods in the cars and their mounts in the cars, they're all DSLR or I suppose they're moving to mirrorless now.
I've noticed recently that the move towards action cameras in that space, and I think that says a lot about where action cameras have got to now. You know, there's a lot running Hero 9s, that level of camera, for their in-car footage, and it's purely because you know that you get past 4K and most people haven't got a 12K telly, and actually,
well, 8K is the next step, isn't it?
Well, Blackmagic have released a 12K, a 12K big boy proper.
I've made this point before, and I'm still looking at 3 1080p TVs at the moment. I can film in 4K on my phone because my phone is capable of it, but the only place I can watch it in 4K is on my phone. Yep. Which most of the time, for me personally, I'm not. I'm sat in front of my computer screen in 1080p.
And when you're watching anything in 4K on your phone, I defy anyone to tell me they can tell the difference between 4K and 1080 on their phone.
Yeah, you need a big screen to tell the difference.
Yeah.
So I've got a 5K screen on my Mac and I've got a 4K screen on my TV. But if I'm upstairs, I'm watching a 1080p. Yeah. There's that sort of thing of, if I want to watch a film in the best quality, I'll go downstairs and I'll sit in my room and I'll watch it. And you can tell the difference between 4K and 1080p, but it's only in certain circumstances and depending on how it's shot.
And when you get out to the ridiculous, there is no, to my mind, knowing that the human eye can only see to a certain resolution anyway. The only reason you buy a 12K camera is bragging rights.
It could be useful in the edit.
I think what's happened is we've got to a point where technology moved so quickly that the majority of people just didn't keep up.
Yeah.
Like, majority of our friends and family are probably still running on a 1080p TV, unless they've upgraded very, very recently. And at which point they'll just be getting into 4K. And everyone's talking about 8 and 12K at this point. It's like, it's completely pointless. I'd rather shoot. I've done this when I've upgraded GoPros. Instead of shooting in 4K, I'll shoot in 1080p, but I'll shoot at 60 frames a second. So that in the editing process, if I want to slow a shot down, I can. I've got more flexibility and scope to do that, rather than shooting in 4K. Because let's be honest, if you're watching a video on YouTube in 1080p, it's still good quality and it's still high definition.
Frame rate's another one to bring up, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's important.
That's what I mean, 60 FPS.
So I'll shoot, and I will shoot on most things where I can in 4K 60. Again, for those slow-mo shots. If I've not got 4K 60, I'll immediately default to 1080 60. I won't use 4K 30.
No,
I'll always try and shoot in the best quality I can. Purely down for the edit.
On occasion, I will use 4K 28 for reasons of blur and making it look more realistic. But 4K 30 for a panning shot that I'm going to slow down anyway, I'll go to 1080 60.
Yeah.
Brayden was confused by that.
It's like high FPS stuff looks weird. I've watched things in like 120 FPS and it doesn't look natural.
It's because of that lack of blur. So that's why if I'm filming something that I'm going to keep at that frame rate, I will go to 4K 28 because it looks more natural even than 4K 30.
The problem you're getting now is when you're getting into the 120 FPS range, you're getting into the limits of what your screen that you're watching it on can handle, because the screen that you're watching it on has to light up all the pixels and the LEDs, which you're probably watching on at this point, and change and take all these frames away fast enough. It can't do it fast enough. You're not going to be able to see the frames properly, and it's going to look choppy. And equally, if you go the other way, if there's not enough frames, it looks like a slideshow rather than an actual smooth video.
But then again, the other side of that is, so some people will have noticed a few videos ago on the unboxing videos, I was very choppy, and that wasn't down to frame rate. The frame rate on this camera actually wasn't changed. What happened was I dropped the megabits per second down by having too dim a set of lights around. And then you get into the point where actually it's time to move from this stuff to the stuff that Mark uses, because you get to a point where the sensor's not big enough to capture all the light you need in a low light setting.
Yeah, but it's not just that as well. Like, just before we get too far away from it, you're talking about sensor size and frames and things like that and quality, but the difference between one of those little cameras and a big DSLR is not just about image quality. It's not about 4K. It's like the feel of the image. You can tell when an image is taken on a really good DSLR. It looks different. The way the depth of field and things is different. You can, like, those super crazy telephoto shots of little detail. You can't do that on a phone still. You need those.
That is the sensor getting the light, and also the quality of lens.
So
it's the glass that's the important bit. Effectively, it's because the lens on a that's pitiful and tiny compared to what's that, a 50 mil on there.
Because I think at this point, Bryn is right. It makes a difference because the DSLR has a hell of a lot more settings that you can change.
Yeah.
And you can start fiddling with exposure lengths and all sorts of other stuff and your ISO and that, which some phones do have, but it's not going to be as good.
You're limited by your aperture on phones.
Your lens isn't as big. But the other thing to note is most professional photographers will shoot in RAW and then edit it in Lightroom.
Yeah.
Even without that, like if you take just a picture, not in RAW, just a JPEG picture with a decent DSLR, it looks different. It really does.
Yeah, even my 10-year-old D300, that's what so if you look at the Violent Runnings photos from Yakushi, I took all of those on my Nikon D300, and it is better than anything I could take on my phone because I've had it so long now. I can fiddle with all the settings to such a way and save them as well, and get it just right.
I'm going to contradict everybody there because and I'm not, and this is not me saying, this is me saying you reach a point where you need to go to a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. But actually, when you're on the kit that I use, you can change the ISO settings. The aperture is the thing I'm stuck with.
It doesn't.
The aperture a lot of the time is the thing. Like iPhones are stuck to like 2.8 or something aperture, which is quite a wide open aperture because it's trying to let in as much light as they possibly can, but whilst keeping a decent focal length. Whereas I can sit there on f8 taking photos. I can boost the ISO up so the sensor's basically sensing more light, and I can still shoot pretty quick.
I'm looking at the photo settings on my phone while you talk because it's interesting.
So just to explain to if I remember, I can explain this right. What you get is with the aperture is the amount of light you let through a lens into the mirror, essentially the image
into where the sensor is, or where film was in olden days.
Yeah. So what happens is when you're trying to take a photo of a moving target like a car, what you need to do is turn the exposure settings all the way down and take a really fast photo, because if you take a long exposure, you get blur. So what you need to do is turn the aperture up to let more light in, and then take a really quick exposure
That
so
depends.
that you get more light in.
Yes.
Depends,
Yes and no.
depends if you want the
Basics.
blur in the photo to express speed, and that's
Yeah.
where you get back into telling the story with the photo. But yeah.
You can.
That's
if
essentially
you're
how the two different things
if you're
work.
panning and following the car, and you're focused on the car and you're panning, that will be in focus, and you can have the background blurred, and that will show that the car's doing speed. But if your shutter speed is too high, it will stop the wheels, so it'll look like the car's just sitting there on the corner, not moving, even though you're panning it. So it's getting a mixture of the speed right, which is generally a little bit slower than you think. I generally put the speed setting roughly around what my focal length of my lens is. So if I'm on my 50mm, I'll shoot around 50th of a second or whatever. If I'm on a longer lens, a bit longer because it takes away some of the shake. Because I don't like using monopods and things like that. I'll use my big lens freehold and pan that way. But yeah, it's all down to, if you've got a wide open aperture, say I can go to 1.8 on this, which is really wide, letting loads of light in, you're only going to have a short gap of where your focus point is. So you can get like someone, if you're taking a photo of someone, you'll have the background blur. The background will naturally blur because you're focused on one point. Whereas if I went to say f11, you're going to get a lot more in focus because the hole that's letting light in is a lot smaller. But you then have to compensate with either improving the changing the sensor settings with the ISO, or shooting longer with the shutter speed.
It's not easy. I spent an afternoon at one of the shows at Santa Pod a couple of years ago doing just that, sat on the edge of the drag strip taking panning shots because I've not really done it before and experimenting with it. And I think out of about 400 photos, I got 2 that were in focus.
Yeah, I'll quite easily take 2,000 photos on a track, when I go to a track, and I'll throw away a load of them.
And that's I think that's true for any photographer or videographer. You'll look through your stuff and go, "Oh, I did a bad job there. No one's ever seeing that."
That's why
you just press that button that says DEL on your keyboard, and it vanishes forever.
I've got to say, it goes back to my original point of you film everything, you take photos of everything, because quite often the photo that you like the most is the one you just took offhand without actually thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like the best photo I ever took of our Labrador was literally the first one I took of him as I got my brand new camera out of the box, just went click. And that was the first photo I took, and that was the best photo I took of him.
That's because it was all on auto and it did everything for you.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's not the answer. If you ask me, like, go into your shutter speeds and your apertures and things, that on a DSLR, that's where you start to see that kind of that feel and what different photographers like. And we can go to a drift day and there'll be 3 photographers there. And all of their photos will look completely different because of the decisions they made on how they like to do things.
Yeah.
As you say, you want to get the car is the subject. And some people will do, like, when I used to do a little, amateur photography, but I used to really like a big aperture so there's not a lot of background in it and really, really zoomed in. I like that telephoto, everything blurry. And that's a feel. Some photographers, you see that. And some of them do smaller apertures and things and like the panning, like Mark says, and you get a similar effect. The car is the thing that you see, but on one photo, everything's blurry, but like quite, sharp. And on another photo, it's just all background blur because of the panning. And you get a completely different effect in those 2 photos. They're doing the same thing, but they look totally different. And each photographer tends to have the way that they subconsciously shoot, I find. One person's photos because they'll all have this, he's really good at that.
Like this, Bryn, yeah?
Yeah, one of Rob's photos when you see it, because just the way he looks at something when he sets it up, that's how his style always is.
A good example of that is one of the days that I got Harriet to come down to Santa Pod. Obviously, Ian's there, as he always is, taking his photos, and they're all great photos, and he does them every week. And then I've got me driving on the same day with Harriet's photos, and they're just
Different.
there's the way that she shoots them compared to him. He's got to go out and shoot everybody. So he's got to shoot everybody across the big track, and then everybody in the little pen behind him and doing completely different things, whereas she was only there to photo me. So the photos are completely different because she's got a little bit more time to actually think about how she's setting the shots up. And you're using different equipment as well. So they'll both have been using different lenses, which gets you a different result.
Also,
She's
the
also-
thing is, go on.
I was going to say she's also probably coming from. She does a lot of weddings and bits like that. So she's coming from a slightly different medium. So she's got a different eye for what she's seeing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You see that in some of the static shots I've got on my car.
Yeah.
I think-
Bam, like just on the subject of Harriet, the day. Sorry, Mark, and it's another photographer. You know, that she came and shot me, Milton, and Matt at Rockingham. Again, like her photos, there were different photographers there. I got loads of photos from that day, but hers looked different. The mood. It was a rainy day.
Yeah.
Some other photographers' photos looked dull. They looked dim, like a rainy day. But her photos just had this fucking mood, and you could see the wedding photographer thing in that
Yeah.
way that.
Yeah.
Brent,
Yeah.
the one where we're all underneath the gazebo, it's pissed down, we're all sheltered, and we was talking, it just showed the mood of.
Yeah, and it's bright. It doesn't look like
That's the experience of taking photos at weddings.
Yeah, it looks like a film shot for some like art noir shit. It's amazing.
That's one thing I was going to say. Sometimes the best shots are not the ones we're on track. Yeah, it's cool watching us smoke pouring and there's 5 cars all crashing and we're all dying. But the best one is, is when we're in like the pits or we're chatting and when you're not.
One of my favourite things to film, and I genuinely can't wait for us to be back at Yakushi. And one of the reasons I love these little cameras so much, and I've not gone down the DSLR or mirrorless route, is I like to film those little candid moments. And if you whip out a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, people know you're shooting them.
Yeah.
They're like, what's that in the corner? That's a camera lens. I'm gonna change how I behave.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Whereas if I grab this and I'm looking at that tiny little monitor just there, like, you don't know that I'm filming you 9 times out of 10.
That's where phones have come into a lot of filming. They're discreet. You can be filming someone and they'll think you're just checking your Facebook page.
And those little candid moments that you're talking about there, where you're all stood under a gazebo having a little chat, they are some of the most interesting things to shoot with whatever camera you're using, to me. Because it really captures. I'm gonna sound like a little bit of a hippie here. It really captures the kind of heart of the car community as it is. You capture a totally different side of things to us all being out on track or being out on the street or doing whatever we do in our cars. You capture that thing that is just the soul of this passion of ours, and you capture that split second in time. It's never going to happen again, and it's kind of the most beautiful thing you can capture.
It's a good point you make, though, because we've said this before, and most of what we like within the car community and the car scene itself is the people.
Yeah.
And that's why we sit here and do this podcast every week. And sitting down, and Mark will probably agree with this, is sitting down and taking a photo of a car, whether it's moving or it's static, is really, really easy. Because the car will look the same, and if you tell a car to put its headlights on, it will put its headlights on. But if you get some people get some people in a studio and try and capture emotion, that's the harder thing to do.
Have you got Alexa in your car, Matt, hooked up to your headlights? It's just, when I sit in the car and go, car, turn your headlights on, it does nothing.
Oh my god, that's a brilliant idea.
If you want to turn the headlights on,
there is Alexa kits for cars now, isn't there?
Yeah. But you know what I mean. Capturing people and emotions and things like that is a lot harder than taking a photo of a car.
Because Bryn was here. I think you and Bryn was here. I'm not sure. It was when you filmed the Boy Wonder episode video, and it was an FG event, and it was great. But you had to edit some of it out because I then spotted you filming me, so I changed. The qualifying results, because I didn't know, I was still new and I didn't know how well I did.
That's the other side of things, is being in front of the camera and the lens. trying to act natural and act like you're not being filmed and not paying any attention to the camera is one of the hardest things to do. And it's why you'll see some people when they get, say, up to drifting or BDC, where they're on the live stream, that you get out there and you feel people watching you. You can't, it's a real thing. You feel people, you feel the camera, you feel the fact there's a crowd around you watching it, and it does add pressure to you, despite the fact that it shouldn't.
It's something you kind of learn to get used to. The more you've got someone, if you know that there's going to be someone taking photos or doing video, it's easier to let them in sometimes than, say, just having a friend turning up with a camera or something like that. If you've got someone specifically in for it and their role is to film, then you know that at some point they're going to come up closer to you, or they're going to be further away, and so you don't necessarily, you get to the point where you don't look out for that person.
Yep.
Whereas if it's like mates doing it, I've always found it's a lot harder, because they're wanting to have a conversation with you, but you're sitting there trying to get the photo of them in that in that mood or something like that.
That's the thing. I find it hard to, like, if I'm doing an interview or something, and obviously cameras, you think they pull it here, and you're like trying to get away from it because you think it's too close, but actually on the shot it's framed, and you're not. It's not like zoomed in on your nose or something.
Mm.
It's all down to how the person doing it talks to you about it. If they're doing an interview, then they've got to be telling you, "Great, I'm going to have to set it here, so I've got you in the full shot."
Yeah.
If you tell someone how you've got the shot laid out, and if it's an interview, as I was saying earlier, you want it on the rule of thirds, so that you're looking out at the screen. A number of times I've been camera operator and someone's been interviewing, and I've literally gone, I'm going to hold the camera here, just look at them, don't worry about what I'm doing. I'm just going to make sure you look good.
I think the genuine thing is, we're getting off topic a little bit, and we're talking about how interview technique works now. But
no, that's film and photography. That's quite a big important thing of it.
I mean, not if we're filming cars.
Ooh.
Interviewing,
but then it depends on how you're telling the story.
True, very true. It does depend on how you tell the story.
I think this is going to apply, and this applies to every single hobby or thing that you're interested in. Is if you go out there and you have fun doing it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think that's the best thing about one of the best things about photography is just like cars, you can express yourself, and videography as well. You can express yourself in your own way, and you're gonna have your own style. It doesn't matter what happens. Like you can see in our footage where me and Joe have filmed something together, or where I filmed it on my own. And when I say my own, I mean me and Amy have filmed it, because I've taught Amy to shoot how I like to shoot.
Yeah,
she's not she's an artist. She's not someone who points cameras at stuff. So I just go, look, this is what I want you to capture, and this is how I want you to capture it. And she's learnt that. She's effectively a GoPro gimbal that walks around in that situation.
It's a good point you made there, because you see this shows, and you see the people that have put a little bit of thought into how they frame their shots. So, for example, you get a lot of people that walk up to a car, go, "That's a cool car," pull the phone out, standing up, click, photo. Where you might see somebody with a DSLR come down and go round to a corner of it and then kneel down to get a lower angle, just to frame it slightly better.
Yeah, I want to get like a one wheel or an electric skateboard, just for like getting panning shots of whole rows of cars, but really, really low angle.
You've got a wheelchair, haven't you?
They do there is a little cart thing that you can get. It basically has like roller skate wheels with a motor, and you literally just stick your camera on it, set it in the direction you want, and just let it go. Like the old pullback toy cars, that sort of thing. But
the Hot Wheels, really interesting. I know you mentioned that. Hot Wheels did a mount for the GoPro session.
Did they?
Yeah.
Well, to stick on the cars?
Yeah. In fact, hang on. If I'm not wrong.
Which actually has
talk amongst yourselves while I find it.
That reminds me of the rail that you brought to Rockingham, Mark. And it's one of those steady rails where you just put the camera on it and you just pull it gently, and you just get that real subtle slow pan that just
glide.
Any shot gold dust. That little bit of three-dimensional movement is just incredible.
They have things that look like a DeWalt drills thing or a sander thing. You just pull it on and it's like a rails.
Just some little rails, and I think with your one, I had to pull it with like a lanyard or something along the rail.
Yeah, because I haven't got the bar on it to do it. So you just have to either move it yourself or pull it with a cable. But it does work really well. It works really well in interviews as well, because if you're interviewing someone and you have that slight little bit of movement, it just adds just that little bit of dynamism, or a bit more dynamics to it.
Essentially, what that is a scaled down version of what they use in big studios, because they use the camera operator sits on basically what is a little train on some tracks, and it moves so they can get panning shots in TV shows and whatnot. And essentially, what you're using is a scaled down version of that just for the camera in its own.
Yeah. If you look at what BBC News use when they're doing the news, they've got 3 cameras set on angled rails that go round. It's all robots. There's no human control in the actual studio. They'll be off in the control room. And there was the news the other night, and they were doing it, and suddenly the camera was looking at someone, and suddenly it just sort of zoomed out and then went off randomly to the right. Which was really odd, but yeah, it's
there you go.
Just shows the little.
That's where the session sits in it, and it's just a little Hot Wheels.
Wow,
that's cool. Now you just need to get one of those, like the loop things
and stuff like that. That's essentially what that's for. But you get to a point now where cameras are tiny cameras, and I think if I can reach, I've got one for a Raspberry Pi.
Why do you people have so much of this stuff?
Because it's a hobby.
I have a phone. I have a question though. What's the difference between RAW and JPEG or?
So RAW is basically how the sensor will receive the data put out in a file. So you can you've got more options. It's uncompressed, which means that all the data's there. Whereas with a JPEG, it's basically the settings of how you had the photo saved straight to a compressed file. And the problem with JPEG is the more you open and close and save and everything, you slowly degrade the quality of image. Whereas with the RAW, it's all that data, it won't ever lose quality. And when it comes to editing, because you've got so much more of that data from the sensor, you can change so much or find so much more in an image that wasn't there. So, for example, if you've taken a photo which is really dark, if you've taken a photo that's really dark, you can sometimes bring back a lot of the detail that you physically couldn't see in that photo. It's crazy the amount of data these sensors actually pick up.
This camera is 1080p and does have night vision, and that's the sort of size you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the sort of size you're looking that's in your phone, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same sort of thing, but it just shows you how small they are and how...
You could put that like in a teddy bear and hide it somewhere.
Milton, don't get ideas, mate.
Every time.
Every single time. So, on that note of Milton turning into a creepy weirdo...
It's a spy camera. That's what I was going for.
Yes, Milton. Okay.
But you can buy these for 20 quid.
Yeah.
We're at a point now in technology and advancement in such a way that this is 20 quid, and you can do all sorts of things with this with a Raspberry Pi, and that's something.
So getting back on topic, because editing and storytelling and all that good stuff is going to have to happen to keep this in time frames. As you move forward, you then go on to getting your first DSLR, getting a mirrorless camera, and the prices on mirrorless and DSLRs aren't that dissimilar now, to kind of my knowledge.
Yeah, they're both similar. It's all down to what you're really wanting to do with the camera. I got my DSLR before mirrorless really kicked off in the way it has done in the last sort of 6 months to a year, which is all full frame. And you're going to ask what a mirrorless is and what a DSLR is.
He knows what I was going to ask.
The most important difference is that DSLR makes the cool clunk noise.
But the cool clunk noise is the mirror moving out of the way of the sensor. So a DSLR is a digital single lens reflex camera, which means you've got one lens, which you're looking through the image. It projects onto a mirror, comes up into your prism where you look through. And then when you take the photo, that mirror will move out of the way, reveal what was originally film, but is now a sensor. Take the image, then bring that back down again once the image has been taken. Whereas with a mirrorless, it doesn't have that mirror, so it's just light shining onto the sensor. And if you've got a viewpoint, that's just a little screen that you're looking at, rather than it being.
Oh, so the viewfinder on that is a tiny, like 1-inch screen, or whatever,
or smaller than that, yeah. Whereas the DSLR is physically you looking at mirrors at what you're looking at.
So in theory, if you've got a DSLR, you could miss something by 1 frame, because how quickly does that go out the way to take the photo?
They flick up in.
That's what your shutter speed is.
But
So
basically, as quick as your shutter speed is as quick as it will move out of the way. But if you're doing a lot of the new ones, if you're doing multiple shots, as you hold down the shutter, it won't be the mirror going up and down. It will just lift up, and it will just be the physical shutter.
Yeah. So the other side of that is the limitation of me taking multiple shots, like holding the button down and taking loads of shots sequentially, is the write speed to my memory card. I get to a point where I can take 5 to 10 photos fairly quickly, and then it starts slowing down to about 1 a second, because it just can't process any of that data fast enough.
Is that the same thing with video as well? Like that's why you want a decent write speed memory card, right?
Yeah.
It's good to have a good write speed memory card. It's not as important on video as it is if you're doing multiple exposures on a camera, you'll fill up the buffer on the camera very quickly before it can write. But if you, for example, the memory I've got on mine, XQD card, this is 32 gig. It's got a write speed of 440 megabytes per second, which compared to a high-speed SD card, you're looking 95 megabytes per second. There's a huge difference between what you can do depending on your memory format. So this is a lot quicker. It's also a lot more expensive. So that 32 gig memory card cost me about £100.
Wow. Whereas you can buy like a terabyte one for the same.
What I'm saying is throughout this whole night is that we've gone through a lot of stuff, but it's all related.
Yeah.
So it's not just about go out and buy a camera. You've got to have a good memory card. You've got to have something to be able to process the photo at the other end and all the rest of it. It's not just get the camera.
No, it's never. You need to think about what you want to do and how you want to go about it. I mean, the thing I was looking at very recently was whether or not to make the decision to move to the Sony A6400 or to buy a lot more action cams, right? And I've settled on let's buy some more action cams, and then I can mount more cameras to stuff and get more angles and get more footage for now. But even then, I was looking at things like, I don't know, Mark, what would you say, like, getting your first 3 lenses? What focal lengths would you go for?
I always go for whatever is the equivalent of what you can see. So on my DSLR, it's a crop sensor. Yeah. Which I'm now going to get asked what's a crop sensor. So what you've got full frame, which is the same size as a 35mm film. Yep. So what you used to shoot, the reels of these films is 35mm picture. The sensors on a full frame camera is basically the same size as that. Whereas with crop sensor, it's a smaller sensor. So it's like almost zoomed in a bit, which is one of the reasons why I went for the crop, so I can get a longer zoom focus. So
I'm lost.
I knew you were going to be lost. I was trying to make it so you'd understand that.
You just make pretty pictures of the car. That's all I care about.
So basically, I've got a 35mm, which is the equivalent of a 50mm, which is what your eyes view. That's where I sort of start with as a prime lens. Basically, then it makes you think about what you're taking photos and how you see. If you're then doing stuff that's further away, you want a nice zoom lens. I started off with a 70 to 200, and now I'm on a 100 to 500 lens. Obviously, the the longer it is, the further the car away is, the closer the shot effectively looks.
Yeah. I've had the reverse. I borrowed because I didn't have the money for a good lens at the time. I borrowed I think it was a 75 or 100 to 300, and for most racetracks that's good enough. That'll let you get close enough. But what I found was when we were walking through the paddock and trying to take photos of the cars and the pits and stuff, I couldn't zoom out far enough. So I had to stand sort of 20 meters away to take a photo, and that's why you see photographers carrying around 4 or 5 lenses with them in a backpack, because you've got to have the right lens for the right moment.
Yeah, so I've got like 35mm and I've got a 50mm for when I'm sort of closer up. So when I was standing on the inside of Druids at Brands Hatch, I'd be using my 35mm or my 50mm because I needed that wider shot because I was closer to the car because of where you physically are. But then if I'm on the outside of Druids, I need my longer lens because they're then a gravel trap away from you. So it's having the lens for the situation.
And it's essentially the right tool for the job. We're just talking lenses.
Yeah. And I think
it's like you can't go drifting in a front-wheel drive car. Well, you can if you put McDonald's trays on the back, but you know what I mean. You can't do. You've got to have the right tool for the job.
You can do it, but it will never be perfect. But you're better off getting a rear-wheel drive car in the first place.
And that's the
Thanks. I've got a front-wheel drive.
You're not drifting. You're fine.
That's the real thing when you come down to it. Is once you've got your body for your camera, it's all about the glass that you're going to use for what you want to shoot, and you get into a different realm of things. I know guys that have spent thousands of pounds on glass, and not a lot on their body.
I saw a figure, we must be talking 10, 15 years ago, that the guys that shoot F1 and they have like the 1 foot lens, they're like 15 grand. And it's probably more than that now because this was 10, 15 years ago.
I've seen them secondhand. You can pick them up for 8 grand. Yeah.
Yeah,
my lens was £400 secondhand.
Cries in money.
My camera was £1,500. That was just the body alone.
You could buy a nice MX5 for that.
Yeah, that's my thoughts.
It depends which side of the camera you want to be on.
This is the thing, right? We all think we've got a really expensive hobby building race cars, but like you get into photography and videography, and you're just on a whole nother plane of.
No, it's just MX5s because they are so cheap. You get so desensitized to everything else. If you go for a Nissan S13, S14, they're 3 times the price. Everything's more expensive.
I'm in that boat with the RX-7.
Yeah, he's in that boat with the RX Dorito.
Anyway, we're getting slightly off topic here.
I think
then you're doing with the RX-7 what we're talking about with the cameras. You started off with your MX-5 to get you going, and you're now upgrading your equipment. And if that makes sense, you're getting a better lens.
It's all relative because you could put 1,000 horsepower in your car. But you're not going to have the drivetrain or the wheels to put it to the floor, or the brakes to slow you down, or the suspension to control it.
But then, if you think about your gimbal, like your suspension, doesn't matter how much in-camera stabilization you've got. At some point, you're going to go out and go, well, that's not as steady as it could be, and you're going to shell out on DJI Ronin, for example, just to get that slightly smoother footage.
And at the end of the day, you can be the man with 10 grand in your camera setup, and Tom Van Beek will still make you look like an absolute chump in his like tiny little point and shoot if he takes a better video.
But again, this circles back to editing and technique, because if you don't have either of those things, you can have all the gear and no idea.
I'm pretty sure. So I didn't upgrade my camera body until I was confident enough that I'd got the most out of my previous camera body.
Yeah.
I'd upgrade the lenses, but the body I had a Nikon D3200, the base model, and I kept that for a good 5-6 years until I was at that point of actually I could do with something slightly larger because I'm getting bigger lenses, but also I'm getting to the point where I'm comfortable enough that I could go for a more professional spec camera and get the results out of that camera.
This is another point there, and I say this about buying tools for your car and anything at all, is if you don't really know what you're looking for, go and buy the cheapest thing you can find. So if you want to get into photography and you want a DSLR, go and buy the cheapest secondhand DSLR you can find, and go and get some experience with it. And same way you did with your small Nikon, you know, it's not got all the features and the bells and the whistles. But by the time you got to a point where you're upgrading, you know what features are important to you and what you can live without. So when you go and buy that upgrade, you know exactly what to look for.
Yeah. Are lenses interchangeable with cameras, or are they proprietary? That was a big word. L.
That was some. I was going to say that was some big words for.
Where's Milton? Where's the real Milton?
Good
a lot
question,
of
to be fair.
across.
Explosion.
So on the same, if you stick within, say, the Nikon range, a lot of them are, unless you've got the mirrorless, which is their new Z connection. But I went from having the D3200 base model to the D500, and I could swap the lenses over. If I then went full frame, some of my lenses wouldn't work because they're designed to work on the crop sensor. So they're a slightly smaller lens.
Can you get adapters and things?
There's no point. You're better off upgrading, because you basically, when you move up to full frame, you're going to move up to it opens up another level of lens availability.
Okay.
So you can still use the higher end lenses on your crop sensor, but you can't use the crop sensor lenses on the better cameras, basically.
While you're on this subject, you can only use Nikon lenses on Nikon cameras, and you can't use Canon lenses on Nikon cameras, and vice versa. You have to use a Canon lens on a Canon camera, because the mounting points, the mounting points themselves, where you twist and clip the lens in, are slightly different, kind of like your PC.
Yeah, these bits.
Your car.
Can you not get
You can get.
Can you not get adapters for that?
Adapters for those.
You can get adapters. I've got an adapter so I can run old Olympus Zuko lenses on my Nikon. So I've got proper old school lenses which have a really different sort of feel to them.
If I remember rightly, you can go one way but not the other, because one lens was slightly bigger than the other. So you obviously couldn't put a bigger lens on a smaller body, but you can put a smaller lens on a bigger body. I can't remember which brand was which, but
yeah, there's quite a few different bits that you can do. I've got a film lens which is screw in. These are sort of clip round, and I've got other ones but I've also got a film SLR Nikon that I can use pretty much most of my lenses on that film SLR, because it's a lot of my lenses are for full frame cameras, but I'm using them on the crop sensor, so I get a better range.
That's the thing.
When I'm
That's the thing. Actually, quite a lot of my photographer friends said to me is, even if you get a camera with a crop sensor, buy full frame lenses.
It future proofs you if you then move up to full frame. But also, if you're wanting to shoot something further away, because of that crop, it gives you a longer focal length. Yeah.
So, that's a lot of information for people to absorb. I'm just looking at the timer. So before I've edited this down to whatever length it comes out, we're at about 2 hours of footage.
We've been talking for a while, but there's a lot of stuff to go through.
Yes, so
we've only just caught the surface, really.
Yeah.
Maybe a part 2.
I think what we'll do is we will get Mark back for another episode of part 2, which is a little bit more technical in nature, a little bit less of me and Matt waffling about our hobbyist stuff. And a bit more.
This is where Mark plugs his Facebook page.
Or doesn't.
Sorry.
Or doesn't.
What?
What's your
Facebook? My Facebook page.
Yeah.
And
Mark J. Ray.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, just search for Mark.
Links down in
it's
that.
It's not been
bit.
updated for a while, but
Yeah, but I think
if somebody wants to ask you questions and stuff, then that's probably the best place to find
message me on there. Yeah.
I have an idea.
Uh-oh.
We should all go to Mark's page. He could put a comment up or his photo up of his favourite photo he's ever taken.
Yeah.
And then four of us can put our favourite photo that we've ever taken, and people can just pick whose is the best.
Yeah, I'm not taking part in this competition. And on that particularly bad idea from Milton.
That was a good idea.
We're going to end this week's episode. That's been Mark. That's been Milton.
Yeah, see you later.
That's been Bryn. And that's been Matt.
Bye.
I've been Bam. Thanks for joining us this week, and we will catch you next week when we will talk about some more car-related stuff. Bye-bye.